The longing for a child. In the heart of the vast African plains, nestled between rolling hills and a winding river, lay the peaceful village of Nyoro. It was a place of warmth and harmony, where the people thrived on the land's bounty, sharing stories under the golden glow of the evening sun. The villagers lived as one big family, celebrating births, marriages, and harvests together. Among them was a kind and hardworking couple, Amoni and Omori. They had been married for over a decade, their love unwavering, but one sorrow cast a shadow over their happiness: they had no child. While other women of the village nursed their little ones or watched their children grow into strong young men and women, Amoni remained childless. Every year, she watched her friends celebrate the birth of new life. "Can you believe my son is already 10, one friend would say. "My daughter can now weave baskets like a grown woman," another would boast. Amoni would smile and nod, but inside, her heart ached. She longed for the day she, too, could cradle a baby in her arms, whispering lullabies under the moonlight. The pain became sharper each time she heard the giggles of children playing by the river, knowing that her own home remained silent. Omori, a strong and patient man, always reassured her. "Amoni, my love, children are gifts from the spirits. If it is meant to be, it will happen in its time," he said. But patience was a difficult thing for Amoni. Each day, the desire for a child grew stronger, filling her dreams and waking moments alike. A desperate journey. One evening, while gathering herbs in the market, Amoni encountered an old friend she had not seen in years, Saida, a woman known for her wisdom. "Amoni, you look troubled," Saida observed, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Amoni sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is the same burden I have carried for years, Saida. I want a child." Saida nodded knowingly, as if she had been expecting this moment. "There is a man," she said in hushed tones. "An elder who lives beyond the hills, in the village of Okuta. He has helped many women who long for children. But his ways are mysterious." Amoni's heart leapt with hope. "Where can I find him?" Saida hesitated before answering. "His wisdom comes with great power, Amoni. Are you certain you are ready for whatever he may ask of you?" Without hesitation, Amoni nodded. She would do anything. That night, she told Omori about her encounter with Saida. "Amoni, we have sought every remedy, prayed to the ancestors, and waited for years," Omori said, his voice laced with concern. "What if this man is not to be trusted? What if his solutions come with a cost?" Amoni took his hands in hers. "Omori, my love, I cannot bear this emptiness any longer. This is my last hope. Please understand." Though his heart was heavy, Omori saw the determination in his wife's eyes. He knew that no words could change her mind. "If you must go," he said softly, "then go. But be careful, my love. I fear that some gifts come with shadows." The elder's warning. At dawn, Amoni set off on her journey, walking for hours beyond the hills, past fields of swaying grass and into unfamiliar lands. As the sun reached its peak, she arrived at the village of Okuta. The people there directed her to a small hut on the outskirts, where the elder, Mziborori, lived. The hut was modest, surrounded by ancient baobab trees, their gnarled roots twisting like silent guardians of secrets untold. As Amoni approached, the door creaked open before she could knock. Inside, Mziborori sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed as if deep in thought. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and powerful, carrying the weight of many lifetimes. "You have come seeking a child," he said, without opening his eyes. Amoni gasped. How had he known? "Yes, Mzi," she whispered. "I will do anything." Slowly, the elder opened his eyes, studying her carefully. "Anything," he echoed. Amoni swallowed hard and nodded. Mziborori stood and walked over to a shelf, pulling down a small bottle filled with a shimmering golden liquid. "This is what you seek," he said, holding it out to her. "Drink it tonight, and within 9 moons, a child will grow in your womb." Tears filled Harmony's eyes. She reached for the bottle, but just before her fingers could grasp it, the elder's gaze darkened. "But beware," he continued, his voice now grave. "Your daughter will be blessed and cursed. She will be tied to the spirit world, unlike any child you have ever known. And most importantly, she must never marry." Harmony's breath caught in her throat. "Never marry," she repeated. "If she does, the spirits will claim her." Harmony hesitated, fear creeping into her heart. But then she thought of the empty space beside her at night, the longing in her soul. Wasn't this what she had wanted more than anything? "I will take the risk," she said, her voice firm. Mzibori sighed, as if he had seen this fate before. "Then take the potion, and may the spirits have mercy on your soul." A fateful decision. The journey home felt different, as if the world itself had shifted. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying words she could not understand. She held the bottle tightly, knowing that once she drank from it, there would be no turning back. When Harmony returned, Omari met her at the door, his eyes filled with silent questions. She held up the potion. "It is done, Omari. He gave me this." Omari stared at the bottle, unease shadowing his face. "And what did he ask of you?" Harmony hesitated. "Only one thing. That our child must never marry." Omari's expression darkened. "Harmony, this is not natural. We are interfering with forces we do not understand." "I know," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "But Omari, what choice do we have? I need to be a mother. I need this." Omari reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "If this is what your heart desires, then I will stand by you. But Harmony, remember, every gift from the spirits comes with a price." That night, under the watchful gaze of the moon, Harmony held the bottle to her lips. With a deep breath, she drank the shimmering liquid, its taste sweet yet strangely bitter. As she lay beside Omari, waiting for the first signs of life within her womb, the wind howled through the village, long and mournful, as if the spirits themselves had begun to stir. The birth of Zola and her strange powers. 9 months had passed since Harmony drank the elder's potion. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, she began to feel the stirrings of new life within her. The village of Nero, once a place of sorrow for her, now buzzed with excitement. The women, who once pitied her, now surrounded her with well wishes and advice, eager to witness the miracle that had unfolded in her life. Omari, though still wary of the elder's warning, stood by Harmony's side, his heart a mixture of joy and unease. One stormy night, as thunder rumbled across the sky and rain pounded against the earth, Harmony's labor began. The midwives gathered, murmuring prayers to the ancestors, as the village elders sat outside, listening to the wind howl through the trees. Some whispered that the spirits were watching, that this child was unlike any other. With one final, agonizing cry, a baby girl was born. She was unlike any newborn the villagers had ever seen. Her eyes shimmered with an unnatural glow, as though the stars themselves had been placed in them. The moment she took her first breath, the wind outside calmed, and the heavy rain softened into a gentle drizzle, as if nature itself had sighed in relief. Harmony, exhausted but overjoyed, cradled her daughter in her arms. "Her name is Zola," she whispered. "Gift of the spirits." Omari sat beside her, staring down at their child with a mixture of love and apprehension. He remembered the elder's warning, the fate that awaited their daughter if she ever dared to love another. But as Zola yawned and curled her tiny fingers around his thumb, all his fears melted away, for now. The village celebrated, but behind their joyous songs and drumbeats, some villagers spoke in hushed tones. "Did you see the way the rain stopped when she was born?" one woman whispered. Her eyes, they are not normal. She carries something powerful, an elder murmured. A child of mystery. As Zola grew, it became clear that she was no ordinary child. Even as a toddler, animals seemed drawn to her. Birds perched on her shoulders as she played, butterflies danced around her head, and even the most skittish antelope in the forest stood unafraid in her presence. The villagers marveled, but the whispers continued. She walks with the spirits, some said. She is blessed, others claimed. Or cursed, a few muttered under their breath. By the time Zola was 5, she could predict the weather without looking at the sky. If she placed her hand on a wilting plant, it would bloom the next day. When the river ran low, she would sit by its edge, dipping her fingers into the water, and the next morning, the village would wake to find the river full again. Amoni and Omari, though proud, grew uneasy. They warned Zola to keep her gifts a secret, to avoid drawing too much attention. But Zola was still a child, full of innocence and wonder, unaware that the world feared what it did not understand. One fateful day, when Zola was 10 years old, her secret became impossible to hide. A miracle or a curse. The village was bustling with activity that morning. Children ran through the fields, women pounded grain, and men gathered under the great baobab tree to discuss the upcoming harvest. Suddenly, a sharp cry of pain rang through the air. A young boy, barely 8, had fallen from a tall mango tree while trying to reach for its fruit. He lay on the ground, his ankle twisted unnaturally, his face pale with pain. The villagers gathered around him, but none dared to touch him, afraid they would worsen the injury. Zola, who had been passing by, pushed through the crowd and knelt beside the boy. "It hurts," he whimpered, his face streaked with tears. Without thinking, Zola placed her hands on his swollen ankle. A warm glow spread from her fingertips, a soft, golden light that only she could see. She closed her eyes and whispered something no one could hear. A moment later, the boy's cries stopped. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the swelling disappeared before their eyes. The boy blinked in confusion before gingerly standing, testing his weight. It doesn't hurt anymore," he exclaimed. The villagers erupted into whispers of disbelief. "Did you see that?" one woman gasped. "She healed him, just like that," another muttered, snapping their fingers. Some knelt before her in awe. Others backed away, their faces filled with fear. "This is not natural," an elder whispered. "She is meddling with forces beyond our understanding." The joyous celebration of the miracle quickly turned into uncertainty and fear. The weight of being different. By nightfall, the entire village had heard about Zola's healing powers. Some believed she was a gift from the ancestors. Others whispered that she was cursed, that her abilities were unnatural, even dangerous. When Amoni and Omari heard of what had happened, their hearts sank. "Zola, we heard about today," Amoni said gently as she sat beside her daughter that evening. "What you did was incredible, but you must be careful." "Why?" Zola asked, her large eyes filled with confusion. "He was hurt. I only wanted to help." Omari sighed, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Not everyone understands the things they cannot explain, my child. People fear what they do not know." Zola's heart ached. She had always known she was different, but she never thought it would make people afraid of her. The next day, she walked through the village and noticed how people avoided her gaze. Some moved their children away as she passed. Others whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. "Stay away from that girl. She is not like us. She carries something unnatural." It wasn't long before the distance between her and the villagers grew wider. She could no longer play with the other children. Women no longer invited Amoni to gatherings. Even Omari, once respected among the elders, found himself being treated with caution. Zola, once a beacon of joy, now felt completely alone. She spent more time near the river, talking to the birds, the wind, and the trees, her only true companions. She did not understand why kindness and love made people afraid. "Why am I like this?" she whispered to the wind. But the wind had no answers. The beginning of destiny. Zola's gift had set her apart, and no matter how much she wished to be like everyone else, the world refused to see her as ordinary. She longed for friendship, for acceptance, but deep down, she began to fear that she would always be an outsider. She did not yet know that her fate had already been written, and that one day, the choice to love would cost her everything. But fate was patient, and for now, it simply watched and waited. The stranger who saw her differently. The years passed, and Zola grew into a striking young woman. She was tall and graceful, her deep brown eyes carrying the same mysterious glow they had since birth. Her presence was serene yet commanding, as though she walked between two worlds, one of men and one of spirits. But despite her beauty and kindness, loneliness clung to her like a shadow. The village of Nyoru had long since made up its mind about her. Children were warned to stay away, mothers whispered about her in secret, and young men avoided her gaze, as if fearing that even looking at her might invite misfortune. Zola had accepted her isolation. She no longer sought friendship, nor did she dream of love. Instead, she found comfort in nature, speaking to the birds and the river, the only ones who never feared her. She had come to believe that she was meant to be alone forever. Until one fateful afternoon at the market. A chance encounter. The market in Nyoru was always bustling with life, colorful fabrics draped from wooden stalls, the scent of roasted maize and fresh spices filling the air. Merchants called out their wares, children wove through the crowd, and laughter echoed from every corner. Zola, accustomed to moving through the market unnoticed, quietly browsed the stalls. Though people pretended not to see her, she could feel their eyes on her, their quiet murmurs a constant reminder of her place in the village. But then, she felt something different. A presence. Not of fear. Not of suspicion. But of curiosity. Turning her head, she met the gaze of a stranger. He stood near a spice stall, watching her with an expression she had never seen before, one of genuine interest, not fear. His skin was a shade darker than most in the village, his hair coiled in thick curls, and his eyes held the warmth of the afternoon sun. He was tall, strong, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had traveled far and seen much. And then, to Zola's surprise, he smiled. A real, open, unafraid smile. "Hello," he said, stepping toward her. Zola blinked in disbelief. You are speaking to me." The man chuckled. "Of course. Should I not?" "Most people don't," she admitted, lowering her gaze. "Then they are fools," he said simply. "I am Kiano. I have come from the village of Noberi to trade in spices and silk." "And you are?" Zola hesitated before answering. "Zola. A beautiful name," Kiano said. "It means gift of the spirits, does it not?" Zola stiffened. She had spent her whole life hearing that name whispered like a curse. But from his lips, it sounded different. "Yes," she said cautiously. Kiano tilted his head. "And why do the people of your village whisper about you?" Zola hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "They think I am different." Kiano's smile deepened. "Good. The world needs different." Zola stared at him, her heart pounding. Who was this man? And why did it feel like, for the first time in her life, someone truly saw her? A love that defied fate. Over the next few weeks, Kiano and Zola kept crossing paths. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. A meeting at the river, an encounter at the market. But soon, it became clear that fate was weaving something between them. Unlike the villagers, Kiano never avoided her. He spoke to her without fear, without hesitation, as if she were no different from any other woman. He laughed with her, listened to her stories, and shared his own dreams of traveling the world. Zola, who had spent her life in silence, found herself talking freely for the first time. "Do you ever feel like you were born for something greater?" she asked him one evening as they sat by the river. "I do," Keanu said. "And I think you were too." Zola looked at him, her heart stirring with something she had never felt before. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream. To imagine a life without loneliness. To believe that, perhaps, she was not meant to be alone after all. A proposal under the moonlight. One evening, beneath the great baobab tree, Keanu turned to Zola with a rare seriousness in his eyes. "Zola," he said softly, "I have traveled many lands, met many people, but never have I met anyone like you." Zola's breath caught in her throat. "I do not know what the villagers fear, and I do not care," Keanu continued. "All I see is a woman who is kind, strong, and beautiful. I see the way your eyes shine when you talk about the stars. I see the way the river seems to sing when you walk beside it. And I know that I have found something rare." Zola's heart pounded. "I love you, Zola," Keanu said, his voice filled with certainty. "Will you be my wife?" Silence. The wind whispered through the trees. The moon bathed them in silver light. Zola's mind raced. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe that this was the life she had been waiting for. But then, in the depths of her memory, a voice surfaced. She must never marry. Her mother's words. The elder's warning. She had forgotten. Or perhaps, she had chosen to forget. But now, standing before Keanu, the weight of her fate crashed over her like a tidal wave. If she said yes. If she chose love. What would become of her? But as she looked into Keanu's eyes, full of love and certainty, she felt a kind of warmth she had never known. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid. "Yes," she whispered. Keanu grinned, lifting her hands to his lips. "Then we will be together, my love. Always." Zola smiled, ignoring the cold whisper of fear in her heart. She had chosen love. But love, as she would soon learn, always comes with a price. A mother's warning and the forbidden wedding. The days after Zola's engagement to Keanu were filled with excitement. Though many in the village of Nyoro still whispered behind closed doors, the talk of her upcoming wedding spread like wildfire. Some villagers viewed Keanu as a fool for wanting to marry the girl who walked with spirits, while others hoped that perhaps love could break whatever strange power she carried. But in Amoni's heart, there was no joy. She sat outside her home, staring at the river that had given her daughter comfort for so many years. She had always known this day would come. She had hoped it wouldn't, had prayed that Zola would never fall in love, that she would never have to face the truth of what had been foretold before her birth. But fate, like the river, could not be stopped. A mother's desperate warning. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zola entered their home, her face glowing with happiness. "Mother, I have come to tell you, Keanu and I are to be married in 3 days," she said, kneeling beside Amoni. But instead of the joy Zola expected, Amoni's face darkened with sorrow. "My child," she murmured, her voice filled with years of wisdom and pain. "You must not do this." Zola frowned. "Why, mother? Keanu loves me. I love him. Why should I not marry the man who sees me for who I am?" Amoni's hands trembled as she reached for Zola's. "Because you are not like other women, Zola. You were not meant for marriage. You are tied to the spirit world, and if you marry, you will lose everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Zola froze, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" she asked, a strange chill running through her. Amoni's eyes filled with unshed tears. "Before you were born, the elder who gave me the potion told me something. He warned that my child would be touched by spirits, blessed but also cursed. And the greatest curse of all was that you must never love a man. Never marry. If you do, the spirits will come for you. Zola stared in shock. You knew this all my life. And you never told me, she whispered, her voice breaking. Amani lowered her head. I prayed that the elder was wrong. That you would never have to face this fate. But Zola's shock turned to anger. Mother, I have spent my entire life alone. I have been feared, avoided, treated as an outsider. And now, I have found someone who sees me for who I am, and you ask me to throw it away because of a warning from a man you met years ago. Amani shook her head desperately. It is not just a warning, Zola. It is your fate. I do not believe in fate. Zola shouted. Amani flinched, as if struck. Zola's voice softened. Mother, I know you love me. I know you want to protect me. But I refuse to let superstition dictate my life. I choose love. Amani reached for her, but Zola stepped away. The wedding will happen, she said firmly, turning toward the door. As Zola walked out, the wind picked up, rustling through the trees. Amani watched her daughter disappear into the night, knowing that the spirits were already stirring. And she feared that they would not be merciful. The wedding day, a village holds its breath. The morning of the wedding arrived. The village of Nyoro had never seen such a grand celebration. The air was filled with the scent of roasted meats and sweet honey cakes. Drums echoed through the hills, and colorful fabrics hung from the trees. But beneath the excitement, a tension lingered. Some villagers whispered that today would bring misfortune. Some refused to attend, claiming that spirits did not take kindly to being defied. Yet, in the center of it all, stood Zola, radiant in her wedding attire. Her dress was woven from the finest silk, her hair adorned with golden beads. But the most striking thing was her eyes, not with fear, not with doubt, but with determination. She had made her choice. Kiano, dressed in the traditional robes of his homeland, waited for her beneath the great baobab tree. When their eyes met, he smiled. You are breathtaking, he murmured as she reached him. Zola smiled back. For the first time, she felt truly human. Truly free. An elder stepped forward to begin the ceremony. Today, we witness the union of Kiano and Zola, he announced. May their love be blessed, their days long, and their spirits ever strong. The villagers watched, some in awe, some in fear, as Kiano took the sacred wedding beads, ready to place them around Zola's neck, a symbol of unity, of love, of eternity. The moment the beads touched her skin, the wind changed. A deep howl echoed through the village, rattling the trees and sending a chill down every spine. The air grew heavy, the sky darkened, though the sun had shone bright only moments ago. Then, before everyone's eyes, Zola gasped as her body stiffened, her skin rippling like water. She stumbled backward, clutching her throat as an unseen force pulled at her. A powerful energy surged through her veins, twisting her very being. Zola! Kiano reached for her, but before his hand could touch her, her body began to change. Her legs merged into one. Her skin darkened, hardened into smooth, gleaming scales. Her fingers curled, vanishing into the form of a massive serpent. A collective gasp rippled through the village. The wedding guests screamed in terror as Zola's human form disappeared completely, replaced by the towering figure of a giant serpent, its scales black and gold, its eyes burning with otherworldly light. Zola had transformed. And the spirits had come to claim her. The serpent's bride. For a moment, all was still. Then, chaos erupted. Villagers fled, some screaming, others crying out prayers. Children hid behind their mothers, and the elders fell to their knees, whispering words of surrender to the spirits. Kiano stood frozen, his heart shattered as he gazed at the serpent before him. "Zola," he whispered. But the snake did not answer. Instead, it turned, slithering swiftly toward the edge of the village, its massive form disappearing into the dense forest. Kiano took a desperate step forward, but Amoni grabbed his arm, her eyes filled with grief. "It is done," she whispered. "No," Kiano shook his head. "I will not lose her." Amoni's voice broke. "She is no longer ours to keep." But Kiano refused to accept it. He tore away from Amoni's grip and ran toward the trees, calling out into the wilderness. "Zola! Come back!" But the only response was the rustling of leaves, and the distant hiss of a serpent that was once a woman. And so, the legend of Zola, the serpent bride, began. A love that defied fate. A choice that awakened the spirits. And a man who would stop at nothing, to bring her back. The serpent in the shadows. The village of Nyoru would never forget the day Zola transformed. The moment her human form melted into that of a colossal serpent, the wedding turned into a nightmare. People screamed, mothers clutched their children, and the elders fell to their knees, whispering prayers to the spirits. "A demon," one man cried. "The spirits have cursed us," another shouted. Some fled, some collapsed in fear, while others watched in horror as the massive snake, once their own, slithered toward the forest edge. But Kiano did not move. While the world around him descended into chaos, he stood frozen, staring at the spot where his love had stood only moments ago. Zola. She was still there, wasn't she? Beneath the shimmering black and gold scales, beneath the piercing, glowing eyes, was she still his Zola? His hands trembled, his heart pounded against his ribs, but not from fear. From heartbreak. As the serpent's form slipped into the trees, Zola paused, her head turning toward him. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, hers filled with sorrow, his filled with desperate love. And then, she was gone. The days of mourning. The village fell into silence. No one spoke of the wedding, nor of the serpent that had slithered into the depths of the forbidden forest. The elders called it a curse fulfilled, a punishment from the spirits. They warned that no one must follow her, that the spirits had claimed her now. Amoni, her face aged with grief, sat in her home, staring at the place where her daughter once slept. "I warned her," she murmured. "I begged her. And now she is lost." But Kiano, he refused to mourn. Every morning, he woke before the sun and stood at the edge of the forest, his eyes scanning the dense wilderness, searching for any sign of her. "Zola," he called. "I will find you." But the only answer was the whisper of the trees. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And still, he did not give up. The forbidden forest. "Kiano, let her go," the village elders warned. "The spirits do not return what they have taken," Amoni pleaded. "You are a fool to chase a ghost," others muttered. But Kiano did not listen. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he gathered a bag of food, a blade, and a torch, and walked to the forest edge. "If no one else will bring her back, then I will." The villagers watched in silence as he stepped beyond the trees, into the sacred lands where no man dared to go. A land of spirits and shadows. The deeper Kiano ventured, the more he felt the presence of something unseen. The air was thick with whispers, the rustling of unseen creatures, and the feeling of watchful eyes peering from the darkness. The legend spoke of this place, the realm of spirits, where time twisted and the laws of men did not exist. Only those with unwavering love can pass through these lands, the elders had once said. Many have entered, but none have returned. But Kiano was not afraid. He walked for days, the towering trees swallowing the light, the vines curling around his arms like living things. He called for her again and again, but only the wind answered. Until one night. He heard it. A soft hiss. Not of threat. Not of anger. But of sorrow. And when he turned, he saw her. The serpent's bride. At the center of a hidden clearing, beneath the glow of the spirit moon, lay the serpent. Zola. Her massive form coiled around the roots of an ancient tree, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She had not spoken in months. She had not felt human in months. But when she saw him, her breath caught. Kiano, she whispered. And for the first time since the wedding, she saw herself reflected in his eyes. Not as a monster. Not as a curse. But as his love. The test of true love. You found me, Zola said softly. Kiano stepped forward, his heart aching at the sight of her. I will always find you, he whispered. She turned her head away. I am no longer who I was. The spirits have claimed me. Kiano knelt before her, unafraid. Then let them hear me now, I do not fear them. I do not care what form you take, Zola. You are my heart, my love. And if you are lost to the spirits, then let them take me too. The wind howled, as if the very forest had heard his words. The trees trembled. The air shimmered. And suddenly, the spirits spoke. Their voices echoed through the clearing, neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel. You claim love, mortal. But do you truly understand its weight? Kiano clenched his fist. Yes. Would you fight for it? Yes. Would you suffer for it? Yes. Would you give everything, even your life? Kiano did not hesitate. Yes. A stillness fell over the forest. And then, a blinding light erupted from the sky, swirling around Zola, wrapping her in golden mist. She gasped, her serpent form trembling, her scales shimmering like fire. And suddenly, she was human again. The return to love. Zola collapsed into Kiano's arms, her human skin warm against his. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes, disbelieving. How, she whispered. Kiano held her close. Because love is stronger than any curse. The spirits washed. And then, with the rustling of the trees, the whisper of the wind, they were gone. Kiano and Zola, hand in hand, walked out of the sacred forest, back toward the village that had feared her. When the people of Nyoru saw her as human once more, they fell to their knees in awe. Anamoni, with tears streaming down her face, ran to embrace her daughter. I thought I had lost you, she wept. Zola smiled, holding her mother close. Love brought me back. And from that day forward, the story of Zola, the serpent bride, was passed down through generations. A story of love. A story of courage. A story that proved love is stronger than any fate, love breaks the curse. The moon hung low in the night sky, casting a silver glow over the enchanted forest. Kiano's footsteps barely made a sound as he walked deeper into the unknown, his heart guiding him toward the one he had vowed never to abandon. The trees whispered, the wind sighed, and unseen eyes watched from the shadows. The spirits of the forest knew why he had come. They had seen mortals before, many had sought the realm of spirits, but none had ventured for love. But Kiano was different. He did not seek power. He did not seek riches. He sought only her. And the spirits, unseen and ancient, watched in silence. The enchanted glade. After what felt like an eternity, Kiano emerged into a glade bathed in silver light. The air shimmered with unseen energy, and in the center of the clearing lay a massive serpent, coiled around the roots of an ancient tree. Her scales gleamed like liquid gold, her breath slow and steady. But there was a sadness in the way she lay, as if she were more shadow than spirit, more lost than found. Kiano stepped forward. Zola, he whispered. At the sound of his voice, the serpent stared. She lifted her head, her glowing eyes meeting his. There was no anger in them. No malice. Only sorrow. You should not be here, Keanu, she said softly, her voice echoing through the clearing. The spirits will not let me go. But Keanu did not flinch. Instead, he knelt before her. Not in fear. Not in submission. But in love. I do not care for curses or spirits, he said, his voice unwavering. I love you, Zola. I have always loved you. No form, no force, no fate will ever change that. The tree shuddered, as if the very world had heard his words. Zola's serpent body trembled, a shiver running down her golden scales. I am no longer the woman you loved, she murmured. Keanu reached out, his fingers barely grazing the tip of her snout. You have always been my Zola. Whether you are flesh or scales, you are my heart. And I will never leave you. The spirit stirred. The wind howled. And then, from the shadows, a voice echoed through the trees. Is your love truly unwavering? The voice belonged to no one and everyone at once. It was the voice of the spirits, the guardians of fate, the weavers of curses and blessings alike. Keanu did not hesitate. Yes, he declared. Take my life if you must, but I will not leave her. A silence fell over the glade. Then, the ground trembled. A golden light erupted from the sky, swirling around them, wrapping Zola in a cocoon of energy. She gasped as her serpent form lifted into the air, her body twisting, her scales shimmering. The spirits had heard his words. They had seen his devotion. And in that moment, they made their choice. The curse, born from fear, strengthened by faith, began to unravel. Zola's form shifted, her scales fading into skin, her serpent tail dissolving into human legs. Her eyes, once glowing with an otherworldly fire, softened into the warm, rich brown they had once been. When the golden light faded, she collapsed into Keanu's arms. A woman once more. They returned home. Hand in hand, they walked out of the forest together. As they approached Nyaru, the villagers, who had gathered at the edge of the trees, gasped in shock. They had expected a monster. They had expected an omen. But instead, they saw a woman and a man, unbroken, unchanged, standing side by side. Zola was human again, and Keanu, despite the warnings, had brought her back. Amoni was the first to step forward, tears streaming down her face. My child, she whispered, pulling Zola into her arms. I thought I had lost you forever. Zola held her mother tightly, her own tears falling. Love brought me back, mother. Love saved me. The villagers, once afraid of her, knelt before them. They had feared her. They had shunned her. But now, they witnessed a miracle. She has returned, an elder whispered. The spirits have blessed her, another said. And slowly, one by one, the people of Nyaru welcomed her back, not as a curse, but as a legend. That night, they celebrated. The drums played, the fires burned bright, and the village that had once feared the serpent bride now danced in her honor. And beneath the stars, Zola and Keanu held each other, knowing that their love had done the impossible. They had defied fate. They had broken the curse. And now, their story would live on forever. A love that became legend. For generations, the tale of Zola, the serpent bride, was told across the land. A tale not of curses, but of love that knew no fear. A tale not of spirits, but of a heart that never wavered. A tale that proved, for all time, that no matter the trials, no matter the fate, true love will always find a way. The end.